Astonishment, lingering sorrow, and profound reflection are the emotions that wash over me. After researching and learning about more than 100 Black public figures connected to the romantic and sexual hidden corners buried beneath the perfect shell of fame. Hello everyone, we are our Memory Vault. And this is the video 21 Black celebrities who kept their sexuality a secret until death. This greatly impacts how we view the silent sacrifices of legends, and it might just leave you stunned. This video is perfect to play while you are resting, enjoying a meal with your family, or doing chores around the house. All the information in this video has been carefully researched and gathered from multiple sources. If there are any oversights, please leave a comment below to help our channel continue to grow. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and ring the notification bell to receive updates on our latest videos. Now, let us step right into the stories of our first figures. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston. A woman possessing one of the most glamorous voices and outstanding techniques in history, has long been revered as the absolute queen of popular music. With hundreds of millions of records sold globally, along with the immortal love song I Will Always Love You, she is the embodiment of a perfect dream. In the eyes of the public, Whitney carried the image of an elegant good girl, a devout woman with a constantly radiant smile. Yet few suspected that to maintain that flawless monument, the legendary singer had to trade the very freedom of her soul, locking herself in an invisible cage of prejudice. That tear-soaked secret was only exposed after Whitney passed away through the accounts of Robin Crawford, the deepest same-sex romance of her youth. Growing up under the strict upbringing of a family heavy with faith, especially the fierce opposition from her mother, Whitney had to suppress the call of her heart. In the harsh entertainment industry of the 80s, publicizing sexual orientation was a gamble that could trade away an entire career. She was forced to break up with her true love, get married, and put on a standard shell. The tearing struggle between her ego and the pressure to please the crowd created deep psychological fractures. Through a contemplative lens, the tragedy of Whitney Houston brings an unceasing remorse about the far too expensive price of fame. The suppression of emotions and not being able to live true to herself was perhaps the root cause pushing her into a downward slide of dark dead ends at the end of her life. It strips bare a harsh truth. Society can easily praise a talent, but is too strict to tolerate a difference. Her story is a profound teaching, reminding us that the peak of success will be completely meaningless if a person loses the right to love freely. Genuine love always needs to be cherished, not buried under a glamorous shell. Little Richard. Little Richard is respectfully revered by world music history as one of the greatest architects who laid the very first foundation bricks for the rock and roll era. With an explosive, wild energy and a voice resonating like thunder through the super hit Tutti Frutti, he smashed all old musical molds. His brilliant, glamorous, and highly groundbreaking performance style not only shaped a generation, but also served as an endless source of inspiration for subsequent legends like the Beatles. Before the public, Little Richard was the embodiment of towering confidence, a star who always burned his brightest on stage to bring the most frantic sonic feasts. However, behind the heavy makeup and sparkling outfits was an incredibly tearing and tear-soaked internal civil war. Living in the context of mid-20th century America, where prejudices about gender were still incredibly heavy, he was trapped between his natural ego and the strict religious dogmas he was raised with. Despite occasionally hinting at his homosexual orientation, he always had to quickly deny or cover it up with jokes to protect his career. The fear of being boycotted, of audiences turning their backs, forced Little Richard to wear a mask, exaggerating masculinity, hiding his deepest romantic relationships from the scrutiny of the world's gossiping tongues. That persistent contradiction brings a profound sense of melancholy for audiences who have experienced many ups and downs. The tragedy of Little Richard lies in this: a person who bravely broke all musical barriers, bringing physical liberation to millions of people, yet never dared to truly liberate his own soul during his lifetime. Having to continuously deny himself left deep marks in the mind of a master artist. His story reminds us of the cruelty of social judgments. His rock and roll legacy remains an eternal monument, but his loneliness backstage is also a costly lesson about the desire to live authentically. The agonizing internal pain of Little Richard leaves much sorrow, but the earth-shattering secrets buried by the legends right up next will truly expose the ultimate cruelty of social prejudice. Please do not rush to take your eyes off the screen. Billie Holiday. Mentioning Billie Holiday is mentioning one of the greatest and most wounded souls of American jazz music. Possessing a raspy voice weighed down by human sorrows and worldly experience, she sang as if draining the drops of blood from her very own heart. Her classic work, Strange Fruit, is not only an artistic masterpiece, but also a stern historical indictment condemning severe racial discrimination. On stage with a pure white gardenia pinned in her hair, Billie appeared as a goddess of melancholy, using music to soothe broken hearts. She was the embodiment of resilience, a woman who personally rose from the very bottom of society's dark mud. Yet there is an incredibly deep hidden corner in Billie's life that history at the time intentionally covered up. Few know that this legendary female singer was bisexual, and she had highly romantic, intense, same-sex relationships with famous beauties, typically actress Tallulah Bankhead. In an era where being black was already a harsh sentence, carrying the additional label of same-sex love was like a knife to the throat. To protect her image, her career, and avoid legal punishment, Billie was forced to bury these romances in the shadows. She had to put on the image of heterosexual marriages full of abuse and tears. To the generation of audiences in their 50s, those who always empathize with human pain, the life of Billie Holiday is an ultimate tragic epic. Having to deny a part of her ego, not being able to publicly hold the hand of the person she truly loved, perhaps deepened the wound in her heart, pushing her to seek oblivion in liquor and smoke. Her tragedy reflects the brutality of a prejudiced system that did not allow people the full right to determine their happiness. However, despite those humiliating suppressions, her love and pain were completely elevated into every musical note. The legacy of Billie Holiday teaches us that authenticity in emotion is always the most sacred art, incapable of being buried by any oppressive power. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was not just a comedian. To American pop culture, he was a prophet, a giant who completely redefined the art of stand-up comedy. With sharp intelligence, raw words, and a deeply satirical perspective, he brought the thorniest issues like racial discrimination, violence, and poverty onto the stage. Not sugarcoating reality, Richard made audiences double over with laughter at bitter truths that society always intentionally tried to hide. He built an incredibly edgy, defiant image for himself, a black man deeply imbued with the breath of the streets, fearless before any authority. He was the voice of the vulnerable classes yearning for fairness. Even so, behind that edgy mask and arrogant confidence was a deeply shocking secret only revealed many years after he passed away. Through the accounts of soulmates like Quincy Jones, the world was stunned to learn that Richard Pryor had same-sex romantic experiences, including a relationship with legendary actor Marlon Brando. The fact that a symbol of street masculinity carried fluidity and sexuality was a shock to conservative public opinion. However, living in an entertainment industry rife with gender stigma, Richard used wisdom to keep this hidden corner secret. He feared that truth would destroy the gritty player image he had painstakingly molded, stripping away the support of his core audience group. The buried truth of Richard Pryor brings a highly fascinating and profound reflection. It completely shatters stereotypical illusions about masculinity, exposing a humanistic perspective. A person can be incredibly brave when exposing the wrongs of society, yet incredibly weak in admitting their own romantic ego. This concealment does not diminish his greatness, but only highlights the fragility of an artist's soul before the axe of public opinion. Richard's story teaches us to lessen prejudiced and judgmental views. A person who brought laughter and light to the world deep down inside also has the right to keep for himself dark corners, loves that do not need to be licensed by the world. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross is hailed by the whole world as the Velvet Voice, a true god of love of the R&B genre. Possessing masterful vocal technique and an incredibly smooth, inspiring tenor voice, he created countless immortal love songs like Here and Now or Dance with My Father. Luther's music is like a sweet whisper, having the power to soothe all sorrows and becoming the indispensable soundtrack in the most romantic moments of millions of couples. In the eyes of the audience, especially women, he was the embodiment of a mature, warm, elegant man who profoundly understood the emotional levels of romantic love. His career was a brilliant journey with countless prestigious Grammy Awards. Yet there is an incredibly cruel truth. The man who spent his whole life singing the most beautiful lyrics about love never once dared to publicly hold his lover's hand under the sunlight. Even though speculations about a homosexual orientation always surrounded his career path, Luther always chose to remain absolutely silent. The R&B music industry of that era carried an incredibly harsh, unwritten rule. Male singers had to maintain sexual appeal to female audiences to sell records. The massive pressure from protecting his commercial image and societal stigma choked off his right to live authentically. He had to lock away his ego-trading personal happiness to protect the music he cherished more than life itself. Through the lens of empathy, the life of Luther Vandross is a tear-soaked epic about ultimate loneliness. His tragedy exposes the brutality of an entertainment system that always demands fake perfection. The greatest pain is not loneliness, but having to stand on a stage before tens of thousands of people singing about a transcendent love while his own heart was shivering in the dark corner of evasion. Although he took that secret to the grave, his melodies will always live on, reminding us of the silent sacrifices behind the halo. Luther taught humanity a sorrowful lesson. We have ecstatically enjoyed his exquisitely beautiful love songs, but forgot to create a world tolerant enough so he could freely and fully sing the love song of his own life. The ultimate loneliness of Luther Vandross was already a tragedy, but the truth behind the lives of the outstanding icons right up next will surely leave you astounded and thoughtful. Please continue with us on this highly emotional journey. Truman Capote. Truman Capote is an incredibly special case and needs to be seriously corrected on this list. Although the original video script made a historical knowledge error by placing him in the group of black celebrities in reality, Capote was an outstanding white writer, an unshakable monument of 20th century American literature. With a razor-sharp, sophisticated pen and masterful character psychology description skills. He shook the world with great masterpieces like Breakfast at Tiffany's and especially the pioneering nonfiction novel In Cold Blood. Among the upper class and artistic intellectuals of the time, Truman Capote emerged as the most brilliant star, a man possessing a lavish lifestyle, trendy fashion sense, and the center of all the most prestigious parties in the glamorous metropolis. However, contrary to the original video's assertion of keeping his sexuality a secret until death, Capote was actually one of the rare people who dared to live quite openly about his homosexual orientation right amidst a highly harsh era. But it was precisely that rebellious openness that turned him into a target of cruel societal attacks. In a culture that always upheld stereotypical masculinity, his effeminate behavior, signature voice, and complex same-sex relationships were seen as an insult to traditional values. Behind the arrogant smiles in public, Capote had to brace himself to bear subtle contempt, malicious mockery from the very people who used to surround and flatter him. The massive pressure from public opinion eroded the writer's sensitive soul, pushing him, sliding down into a swamp of deadlock and addictive substances. The event of Truman Capote passing away brings a highly sorrowful silence for those who once loved his literature. To audiences who have passed their twilight years, his tragedy strips bare a harsh truth about the hypocrisy of the elite class. They are ready to praise a person's talent when it benefits them, but ruthlessly turn their backs, trampling on that person simply because of lifestyle differences. Capote's life teaches us a profound lesson that the courage to live true to oneself always comes with an incredibly expensive price. Even though he departed this temporary realm in ultimate loneliness, his genius pen and fierce, rebellious spirit will forever remain a brilliant, indelible mark in the history of human literature. James Baldwin. James Baldwin is not merely a writer. To the civil rights movement and world literary history, he is a blazing torch, a great thinker who used words to surgically dissect the root of America's chronic diseases. With erudite intellect and boundless compassion, he penned classic works like Go Tell It on the Mountain, rawly portraying the pain of poverty and the humiliation of black people. Not stopping there, he was also the bravest pioneer when bringing the topic of homosexuality into mainstream literature through the masterpiece Giovanni's Room. Baldwin was like a lone prophet standing on the peak of intellect to raise a voice demanding fairness, dignity, and the right to be loved for all human beings rejected by society and trampled at the bottom of the abyss. It must be affirmed again as a historical truth to refute the original script. James Baldwin was never a coward who kept his sexuality a secret until death. On the contrary, he lived an incredibly proud and public life about his homosexual orientation, despite having to endure a cruel double pain. In an era where being born black already stripped away many basic rights, openly loving someone of the same sex was akin to donning a social death sentence. He was shunned by his very own comrades in the civil rights movement, who feared he would taint the image of the struggle, while simultaneously being utterly despised by contemporary conservatives. Baldwin had to choose to leave his homeland, going into exile in distant France just to find a breathing space where he was not judged by his skin color or who he fell in love with. Closing his earthly journey in 1987, the legacy James Baldwin left behind is not just pages of books, but a highly noble life philosophy. For generations of audiences in their 50s, his life brings an ultimate admiration for the mettle of a true intellectual. His tragedy strips bare the cruelty of a social system always trying to isolate those who dare to go against the current. However, Baldwin never submitted to compromise with lies. He taught us that living honestly with one's ego is not a sin needing to be hidden, but it is a sacred privilege of human beings. No matter how harsh the era may be, the spirit of steel and the vast love of James Baldwin will always be a lighthouse, illuminating the way for souls yearning for freedom all over the world. Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker is a timeless legend, a true goddess of light who mesmerized the entire glamorous capital of Paris in the 1920s. With wild, frantic dances and towering confidence, she broke all strict racial barriers, becoming the first black woman to step onto the podium of glory of the international entertainment stage. Not only an outstanding performing artist, Josephine was also a hero carrying extraordinary courage. During World War II, she gambled her life to become a brave intelligence agent for the French resistance, using her fame as a perfect cover to transport vital military secrets. In the consciousness of European people, she is the supreme symbol of freedom, seductive beauty, and a tireless fighting spirit for human equality. Yet hidden behind the glamorous smile and outfits adorned with brilliant feathers, Josephine Baker harbored romantic hidden corners that had to be buried tightly in the dark. History has recorded her as a bisexual person, having experienced many highly romantic, passionate relationships with famous women of the time, including legendary painter Frida Kahlo. However, in an era where moral standards were still incredibly strict, exposing her true sexual orientation meant personally destroying the entire career and political influence she had painstakingly built. To protect the image of a national icon and an adoptive mother of dozens of orphaned children, Josephine was forced to wear the screen of heterosexual marriages, silently hiding same-sex romances in the utmost depths of her heart. Through the contemplative perspective of those who have weathered many of life's storms, the truth about Josephine Baker brings a lingering remorse about the price of greatness. She spent her whole life fighting for the liberation of vulnerable communities, but was never truly, completely liberated to love the way she wanted. Her tragedy reflects a sorrowful truth. Even the most powerful and brilliant people on stage sometimes become prisoners of the public's expectations themselves. Even so, those secrets do not taint her image at all, but only make the portrait of this heroine even more humane and greater. Josephine Baker taught us a noble lesson about personal sacrifice for the great goals of the era, forever remaining a proud flower blooming amidst the pages of human history. Bessie Smith. Bessie Smith is respectfully revered by posterity as the absolute queen of the blues, a voice carrying the resonance of heaven and earth which completely reshaped the American music scene in the 1920s and 1930s. Possessing a powerful, deep voice that also harbored tens of thousands of sorrows, she sang the inner voice of toiling lives at the very bottom of society. Classic songs like Downhearted Blues not only helped her sell millions of records, but also turned her into a pioneering feminist icon, a financially independent woman confidently mastering the stage and never bowing to any authority. Bessie Smith appeared as a mighty goddess, using her very own raw original music to smash the chains of poverty and contempt. However, behind that arrogance and strength like a volcano was an incredibly complex inner life and desires imprisoned by prejudice. Not only going through stormy heterosexual marriages, Bessie Smith was also a woman with a bisexual orientation, frequently seeking comfort and passionate love in the arms of same-sex lovers. But in the context of early 20th century America, where law and strict moral standards intertwined, forming invisible nooses tightening around the vulnerable community, same-sex love was considered a heinous sin. Despite being a superstar with massive influence, Bessie still had to live in caution, disguising these relationships under the guise of close friendship to protect her career and avoid the cruel punishment of public opinion. For audiences in their 50s, those who always cherish the inner strength of human beings, the life of Bessie Smith is an epic song soaked in blood and tears. It strips bare the cruelty of an era that did not allow people to fully live true to the emotions of their hearts. Having to constantly divide herself, hiding her true ego behind the velvet curtain, caused her soul to always be in a state of loneliness and rebellion. Even though her life ended in a tragic car accident, while she was still in her prime, her musical legacy and rebellious spirit have never been extinguished. Bessie Smith taught us a priceless philosophy. True music is born from the very bleeding wounds of life, and true freedom always demands extraordinary courage to confront all barriers of the world. Sherman Hemsley. Sherman Hemsley is an immortal monument of the American small screen, a person who brought roaring laughter and pride to millions of families through the classic role of George Jefferson in the legendary sitcom The Jeffersons. Unlike the stereotypical images often seen of black people on television at the time, Sherman successfully built an incredibly unique character. A self-made businessman, smart, blunt, sometimes grumpy but overflowing with family love. His charm, masterful acting, and confident demeanor shattered all racial barriers, turning the show into an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. To the mass audience, Sherman Hemsley was like a familiar uncle, a model rising from hardship to achieve the perfect American dream. In stark contrast to the noisy, blunt nature of the character on screen, Sherman Hemsley's private life was a mystery, quiet and closed off to an astonishing degree. Throughout decades, standing on the peak of fame, he never once revealed anything about his personal romantic relationships, despite the media constantly buzzing with speculations about his homosexual orientation. In an entertainment industry where private life is always dissected to act as bait for public opinion, maintaining absolute silence requires a will of steel and extraordinary endurance. Publicizing the truth during that era could have destroyed the exemplary family patriarch image he was undertaking while drawing the boycott of a segment of conservative audiences. He had to choose to sacrifice personal freedom to preserve a massive television legacy. When Sherman Hemsley quietly departed the human realm in 2012, his passing brought a silence full of mourning and profound reflections on the boundaries of privacy. To mature audiences, his choice was not cowardice, but a highly respectable sacrifice. Sherman's story exposes the fierceness of fame. Popularity granted him everything, but also stripped him of the right to share his personal happiness in the most ordinary and public way. Although he took the secrets of his heart with him into eternity, the smiles he sowed into the world will forever be warm seeds. Sherman Hemsley taught us to appreciate the contributions of artists on screen and learn to absolutely respect the private sky they struggled to shield for an entire lifetime. Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler is a genius mind, a dazzling lighthouse who reshaped the entire landscape of world science fiction literature. In a genre long dominated solely by white male writers, Octavia bravely opened a completely new era. She brought into her pages resilient black female characters, focusing on exploring the deepest aspects of power, survival, humanity, and the strength of community. Her classic works are not merely entertaining fiction. They are sharp prophecies about the future of humanity, about ecological disasters, and the collapse of social structures. She wrote to equip readers with a solid mindset to cope with the unpredictable events of the times. However, in complete contrast to the power of words on paper, Octavia Butler's real life was covered by a veil of absolute enclosure and stillness. The original video used sensational words to weave a narrative about her gender secret, but in reality, she was a deeply introverted person. She chose to pour her entire mind and emotional energy into building literary universes instead of worrying about the narrow gender identifications of society. In a world always craving noisy private life stories, Octavia's refusal to expose her personal life made the media curious and jumped to arbitrary conclusions. She did not intentionally hide any dark secret. She simply wanted to protect the dignity of art, letting the work speak for itself instead of offering up her ego as bait for public opinion. Through a philosophical lens for readers who have experienced many ups and downs, The Stillness of Octavia, Butler leaves a profoundly deep lesson about human dignity. It affirms a truth that we have no right to force anyone to label themselves just to satisfy the curiosity of the crowd. The legacy of a person is not determined by who they love in the bedroom, but is guaranteed by the eternal values they diligently created during their lifetime. Octavia Butler taught us an invaluable lesson about perseverance. No matter how noisy and full of judgment the world is, stillness, steadfastness, and an intellect ahead of its time will always be the most brilliant light guiding humanity through the blinding dark night. Sylvester James Jr. is a dazzling star, a brilliant energy source that completely redefined the disco music scene of the 70s. Possessing a soaring falsetto voice reaching the clouds smooth and with a glamorous performance style that broke all gender boundaries, Sylvester is the embodiment of absolute freedom. Super hits like You Make Me Feel Mighty Real are not merely thumping melodies for dancing, they are proud manifestos about the right to live true to one's ego, the right to shine, and the desire to be loved. On stage, he draped himself in sparkling outfits, brilliant makeup, and smashed society's restrictive prejudices with the brightest smiles. He turned underground entertainment spaces into a glowing sanctuary of tolerance. We must strongly correct a highly serious knowledge error in the original video. Sylvester was never someone who kept his sexuality a secret until death. On the contrary, he was one of the bravest black artists in history, living openly, proudly, and highly boastfully about his homosexual orientation right amidst an era overflowing with stigma. Facing the mockery of conservative public opinion and the barriers of the music industry, he never backed down or tried to disguise himself. Even when facing the epidemic of the century, AIDS, in the late 80s, he also refused to hide. He used the final days of his life to stand up and call for the community's attention, dedicating all his royalties to support poor patients in the same situation. His openness is a great act of resistance. Closing his life in 1988 at the age of 41, the legacy of Sylvester brings an ultimate admiration for older audiences who always uphold authenticity. Labeling him in the list of those who hid is an insult to the mettle of a warrior. Sylvester's story portrays a beautifully exquisite life philosophy. Authenticity is precisely the bravest act of a human life. Even though life may be short and end in pain, daring to stand up to protect one's ego, living with head held high and loving to the fullest is truly an immortal halo. Sylvester taught us that the right to be oneself is not something to beg for, but a sacred privilege that must be won with the fiercest self-respect. Phyllis Hyman Phyllis Hyman was a glamorous star carrying a powerful, melancholic, and highly haunting voice of American soul and R&B music. Possessing a tall figure like a supermodel, a haughty face, and a voice capable of piercing through the soul, she easily conquered both the music world and the Broadway theatrical sanctuary. Songs like You Know How to Love Me or transcendent performances earning Tony Award nominations propelled Phyllis's name into the ranks of the most powerful female singers of the time. In the eyes of fans, she was the symbol of seduction, an independent, strong woman who always knew how to convey the tearing struggles of love into every musical note. The world looked at her and saw only an overwhelming perfection. Yet deep inside that talented person was a crumbling fortress ravaged by unhealable wounds. Behind the glamorous stage lights, Phyllis had to brace herself to fight against bipolar disorder, the exploitation of the entertainment industry, and a chillingly empty loneliness. Particularly, she carried a deep secret bisexual romantic relationships. In a highly conservative society and R&B music market, where a female singer's image always had to be tied to male desire, publicizing love with another woman was career suicide. Phyllis was forced to bury her most genuine desires in the dark, donning a flawless shell to satisfy the cruel expectations of the crowd. The tragedy of Phyllis Hyman closed with a highly painful decision to end her life in 1995, just a few hours before she was set to step onto the stage to perform. To audiences in their 50s, those who deeply understand the fragility of human psychology, her departure is an agonizing indictment of the destructive power of prejudice. It strips bare the truth that ultimate wealth and fame cannot save a soul stripped of the right to live true to itself. Having to constantly suppress emotions and cope with mental illness and solitude drained the last drop of vitality from the renowned singer. The story of Phyllis Hyman is a tear-soaked warning reminding us to learn to listen to the silent cries for help behind the halo so that no talent has to slowly die in humiliating, tearing struggle. Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn was an outstanding musical genius, a great musician behind the most brilliant achievements of the American jazz era. His career was intimately tied to the legend Duke Ellington. The two formed an unbeatable duo that shook the entire world of sound. With erudite composing, thinking, sophisticated arranging skills, and a highly romantic soul, Billy penned immortal pieces like Take the A Train or Lush Life. His music carries a melancholic, elegant, complex beauty that is yet incredibly approachable, touching the softest, hidden corners of the listener's soul. In professional circles, Strayhorn is respectfully revered as a master of melodies, a tireless, creative mind who contributed to elevating jazz into a peak academic art. However, the original video once again made a serious mistake when placing him on the list of those who kept their sexuality a secret. The highly proud historical truth is that Billy Strayhorn lived a life openly as a gay man right from the 1940s, an era where brutal gender stigma could even strip away human life. Instead of running away or faking marriages to protect his reputation, he chose to hold his head high. With undeniable talent, he forced a highly masculine and conservative jazz world to bow in respect to him. The protection of his soulmate Duke Ellington also contributed to creating a safe shield, helping Billy to freely create without having to worry about the malicious, disdainful gazes of contemporary society. For the generation of audiences who have gone through many ups and downs, the truth about the life of Billy Strayhorn brings a fierce inspiration regarding the self-respect of an artist. The fact that he was labeled by the original script as keeping a secret is a regrettable degradation to the extraordinary courage of a person ahead of his time. His only tragedy did not lie in his gender, but in the fact that the halo of Duke Ellington sometimes overshadowed his great contributions before the mass public. However, time is always the fairest judge. Billy Strayhorn taught humanity a profound philosophy. Genuine talent and the pride to raise one's own voice will always have the power to smash all the darkness of prejudice, leaving an eternal legacy lasting forever with the years. Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was a great architect, but was once intentionally forgotten by history, a genius mind behind the most brilliant achievements of the American civil rights movement. While other leaders stood on the podium to receive roaring applause, Bayard was the one who quietly stepped back into the shadows, strategizing and successfully organizing the historic March on Washington in 1963. He was a master of nonviolent philosophy, the one who poured all his heart into coordinating hundreds of thousands of protesters in the most disciplined and peaceful way. His sharp intellect, innate organizational skills, and keen political vision were an invaluable weapon contributing to completely changing the face of American law and society in the 20th century. It must be strongly affirmed that Bayard Rustin was never a coward hiding his sexuality, as the video title implies. He was an openly gay man, and that ultimate honesty turned him into a target of cruel attacks from both enemies and allies. In 1953, he was arrested by authorities and had his dignity smeared simply because of his sexual orientation. More cruelly, even his comrades in the civil rights movement feared that the presence of a gay man would taint the image of the struggle. They heartlessly pushed him out of the stage lights, stripped him of the fame he deserved, and forced a genius mind to operate anonymously in the shadows. Bayard did not hide himself. It was contemporary society that deliberately buried him. The truth about the life of Bayard Rustin brings an ultimate ache about the hypocrisy of history. To audiences in their 50s, those who always value fairness, his sacrifice is a beautifully epic song about the spirit of altruism. He taught us a noble lesson: accepting to endure slander, oblivion, and humiliation to protect the great goal of an entire nation. Bayard did not fight for vain personal halos. He fought for a fierce belief in truth and human equality. Even though time has passed, correcting the truth and honoring his legacy is the only way for humanity to atone for its mistake with a great silent hero. Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan is a great icon, a solid fortress wall of American politics and justice. As the first black woman elected to the Texas State Senate after the Reconstruction era, and the first black female representative from the South to enter the U.S. House of Representatives, she carried the weight of an entire era on her shoulders. Her forceful, echoing voice and erudite intellect during the Watergate hearings became a symbol of integrity, reminding all of America of the supreme value of the Constitution. She did not rely on empty promises to win people's hearts, but conquered the public with a sternness, discipline, and an unshakable spirit of national service. Facing political storms, Barbara appeared as a resilient female general. Yet behind the image of an authoritative female politician, as solid as a rock, was an incredibly carefully protected private life locked tight by the chains of social prejudice. For decades, she maintained a deep relationship with her same-sex life partner, Nancy Earl, but absolutely never let it show before the light of the media. As a black woman, operating in the political elite of the American South, where the roots of conservatism and discrimination were still incredibly deep, she understood better than anyone the price of the truth. Publicizing her sexual orientation could turn into a weapon of mass destruction, smashing all the political credibility and civil rights struggle efforts she had painstakingly built. Silence became a reluctant shield. When Barbara Jordan took her last breath in 1996 at the age of 59, her departure left boundless mourning, but also was full of teachings about sacrifice. To audiences who have crossed their 50s, her life raises an agonizing question. How much personal happiness did outstanding leaders have to trade and bury in order to serve a society still full of scrutiny? The legacy of Barbara Jordan does not lie in the romantic secrets she was forced to hide, but lies in the fairness and the supremacy of the law she brought to the country. She taught us to value the intellect and dedication of women instead of judging them through the cruel lens of outdated prejudices. Jackie Moms Mabley. Jackie Moms Mabley is an irreplaceable monument, a female pioneer who birthed the art of stand-up comedy for black women in America. On stage, she built a highly classic image, a frail, toothless old woman wearing baggy dresses, wearing a floppy hat, and telling jokes with deep satirical tones. Using the cover of a harmless old mother, Jackie skillfully bypassed strict censorship barriers to directly satirize racial discrimination, the hypocrisy of the ruling class, and even the sexual desires of women. She made audiences double over with laughter, but behind those hearty laughs were incredibly edgy social messages, awakening the conscience of an entire generation of audiences living in an era of injustice. However, there is a truth completely opposite to the familiar toothless old woman image on screen, and that is Jackie's highly rebellious and unconventional real life backstage. Stepping away from the stage lights, she was a powerful woman, frequently appearing in masculine suits, slicked back hair, and openly having same-sex relationships with young women. In the Chitlin circuit exclusively for black people, her sexual orientation was an open secret respected by all colleagues. Yet when stepping out into the mainstream white entertainment market, she was forced to put back on the old mom's cloak. She knew well that mainstream society could laugh at a harmless old woman, but would immediately crush a gay black woman who dared to challenge gender norms. The spectacular splitting of Jackie Moms Mabley's persona brings a highly fascinating and also deeply sorrowful reflection for older audiences. Her tragedy was not weakness, but the brutality of an entertainment system that forced artists to act even in real life to survive. It strips bare the extraordinary endurance of a woman who had to alternately change identities to protect her livelihood and her love. However, rising above all that suppression, the optimistic spirit and sharp intellect of Jackie forever remain an invaluable treasure. She taught us that laughter is sometimes the sharpest weapon against oppression, and behind the patient smile of the vulnerable always hides a fierce survival strength that nothing can subdue. Paul Winfield. Paul Winfield is one of the most outstanding and highly respected black male actors in American cinema and television. With a tall stature, dignified demeanor, and acting ability with astonishing psychological depth, he broke racial barriers to take on iconic roles. From the patient-loving father role in the Oscar-nominated film Sounder to the brave captain in the sci-fi series Star Trek, Paul always brought a rare authenticity and majesty. In the eyes of the audience, he is the ideal model of a mature, strong intellectual, and highly self-respecting black man. He contributed greatly to elevating the status of minority actors in the inherently highly harsh cinematic capital of Hollywood. Yet behind an illustrious career and those majestic roles, Paul Winfield had to silently hide a highly serene but also pressure-filled hidden corner. A same-sex romance lasting 30 years with his life partner, Charles Gillen Jr. Living and working in a Hollywood industry heavily reliant on commercialism and underlying stigma, he understood the cruel rules of the game. Publicizing his sexual orientation could immediately strip him of authoritative leading male roles, lower his commercial value, and turn him into the center of a boycott. To protect the person he loved and preserve his professional reputation, Paul chose a highly discreet private life, building a solid fortress wall separating the media's flashing lights and the peace of his home. The event of Paul Winfield passing away in 2004 at the age of 64, right after his life partner passed away, brings an ultimate poignancy about the power of love and the cruelty of society. To audiences in their 50s, his story is a sorrowful testament to the trade-offs of an artist. It raises an agonizing question. Why is a person who dedicated his all to art not granted the right to freely hold his lover's hand walking on the red carpet? Even though having to live in the shadows of concealment, his steadfast love lasting 3 decades is forever a beautiful song about fidelity. Paul Winfield taught us that the greatness of a man does not lie in the fake masculine models society imposes, but lies in how he protects his family and dignity before all the storms of life. Nell Carter. Nell Carter was a brilliant black pearl, a multi-talented female star who shook both the Broadway theatrical sanctuary and the American television small screen. Possessing a signature raspy voice full of inner strength, along with a charming, captivating acting style, she left a deep mark through her Tony Award-winning role in the musical Ain't Misbehavin', and especially her role as the smart, warm housekeeper in the hit sitcom series Gimme a Break. Audiences loved Nell for her explosive positive energy, radiant smile, and ability to turn everyday situations into hearty laughs. She is the embodiment of extraordinary effort, a woman of African descent with a plus-size figure who smashed all traditional beauty standards to rise to the peak of her entertainment career. However, behind that full figure and always sunny smile was a soul enduring much tearing by personal tragedies and gender suppression. Nell Carter was a bisexual woman. Even though she had gone through marriages with men, she still had deep romances with other women. Yet in the context of America in the 80s and 90s, the stigma against the LGBTQ+ community was still incredibly heavy. As a television mother watched by millions of families across America, every evening publicizing gender fluidity could cause a media crisis directly threatening her role and the livelihood of hundreds of people on the film crew. Therefore, Nell had to choose to keep her private sky hidden silently, shouldering mental pains and solitude. When Nell Carter suddenly passed away in 2003 at the age of 54 due to diabetes complications, the truth about the hidden corners in her life gradually came to light, bringing a highly sorrowful silence to the public. For audiences who have experienced all sorts of joys, angers, loves, and hates her story, strips bare the harshness of what is called public image. It proves that behind those who always try to bring laughter to the world are sometimes hearts bleeding because they are not allowed to live true to their identity. Nevertheless, those bitter pains could not overshadow her outstanding talent. Nell Carter remains forever a symbol of resilience. She taught us how to smile and shine the brightest, even when our souls have to brace themselves to bear the invisible shackles of social prejudice. Closing these historic footages full of ups and downs, we understand even more deeply the far too expensive price of greatness and the tears that had to be hidden behind the halo. We hope the video has brought you empathetic perspectives so that from there we know how to broaden our tolerance, cherish contributions, instead of judging the private lives of others. We respectfully wish you always maintain peace in your soul and have truly joyful, warm moments of rest around the family dinner table. If these reflections brought you meaningful value, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to continue accompanying our memory vault. Goodbye, and see you again.